Hey friends, welcome back. I felt recently a bit stressed about the whole PhD situation, and I stumbled upon a few ideas that I think are worth sharing, kind of how to alleviate a bit of that psychological pressure that we all are putting on ourselves. So full disclosure, I did record this entire video that we are about to do outside this morning as a walkie-talkie, but I didn't drink my first coffee yet. And so it wasn't very coherent. And then I used an ND filter that was way too strong, so the footage came out like absolutely disgusting. So I decided to re-record it. How I came to these thoughts was I felt quite stressed with the PhD recently. I have the conference deadline for Sunbelt in Edinburgh in 5 weeks, so I'm presenting there in a little less than 5 weeks from now. And as per usual, when I get stressed, I start to journal. And then I just start pouring thoughts out of my head onto the paper or onto another notebook, which I don't have at hand, or into my headphones as voice notes to myself. Pro tip, if you wear AirPods while talking to yourself, you'd seem less insane. That's just a special one for the friends who don't really like to write. The main theme of this entire video is going to be to keep in mind that during your PhD, you are here to learn. You are here to learn to be a researcher. You are not a full-fledged researcher yet. And I think that's an extremely important distinction to make. You know, when you are learning, you are allowed to make mistakes. You are allowed to feel lost. You are allowed to struggle. And I think a lot of the psychological stress of a PhD, of course, it comes from the environment and the whole publishing and science and all of it. But I think a large part of it comes from the expectations that we put on ourselves. If you signed up for a PhD, you are likely a very driven individual who likely has very high expectations of yourself, which is great. You know, I also do. And I think having high standards for yourself is super important. But you also have to be realistic with these expectations. And for me, keeping in mind that I am in fact here to learn, and there are a bunch of skills that you need to learn, like just acquire, before you can get to the point where you are a full-fledged researcher. That's a long way. And to me, this helps a lot in kind of keeping me sane. So one thing I noticed, and also my supervisor pointed out, because she's awesome, both of them pointed it out on two separate occasions, so they are both very much on the money with this one, is that I wanted to make my first paper and first study to be perfect. I wanted to use the absolute perfect data. I wanted to find the perfect match from theory. And I wanted it to be like this groundbreaking work, which I still think it's very useful to aspire to do groundbreaking work. But if it comes at the expense of your sanity, it might be better to just like reframe it a bit. I have an analogy that I used previously with friends when talking about this kind of like habits and behavior change and like how I look at stuff like this. And that is kind of the pipeline analogy. And the core idea is that worry about the pipeline, like building out the pipeline first before you worry about what you're sending through it. Basically what it means is like, let's say you want to go to the gym and that's what you want to accomplish. So instead of worrying about like how to optimize your workouts and how to target every muscle and whatever, you should focus on finding a schedule that fits for you. Maybe it's twice a week, maybe it's 4 times a week, whatever. Find a time of the day that you like. Maybe you like morning, maybe you like evening, and start there. Figure out your schedule. When can you go to the gym and how long can you spend there? And if you can figure out a schedule that works for you, that's like 75% of the battle. And that schedule, like, okay, I'm gonna be at the gym 3 times a week for an hour, is your pipeline. Now that pipeline is stable. Now it's not gonna burst, it's not leaking, you know, it's not like, oh yeah, maybe I can make it 4, but maybe I only want 2. No, if you decide like, okay, 3 works for me, then your pipeline is solid. And now you can worry about what you're sending through it, which is the actual workouts that you're gonna do, you know, how you like to train, all that stuff. But you have to build the pipeline first. The pipeline is the skills of an academic. And if you think about like what an insane stack of skills a full professor has to be good at, just on the research side. You have to be able to read literature well and interact with literature well. You have to be able to abstract away ideas to like their appropriate level where it's useful for you. You have to be able to write well, obviously. You have to be able to like design experiments if your field requires it. You have to be quite good at statistics to understand what your model is actually telling you and what the limitations are. And that's really hard. Obviously, there is a reason why a PhD is a 4-year journey, because your job here is training to be an academic. Those skills, reading, writing, theory, empiricism, whatever, those are your pipe. That's the pipeline. Those are the skills that you have to build over time. And if in your first paper you only get really good at theorizing and you do a really good literature review, you really find the gap, you really craft your arguments and support them, and then your empirical contribution is a bit meh, that's a success. Because you have acquired that skill and now you can continue onwards for the next one. And maybe in the next one, with your newfound skill in wrangling the literature, you can find a research gap where you have a great idea on how to do some empirical contribution there. Maybe you have an idea for a measure, and then you can put those two together, and then after the next paper, you will know how to do literature, and then you will know how to do measurement. And now that's 2. And then over time, you can build up these skills. And of course, it's not this simple, and of course, I'm also, I'm 8 months into my PhD, so this might very well be just a big bag of copium for myself. But from what I've seen and my conversations with older PhDs, and also my supervisors, this seems to be pretty accurate, that a lot of PhDs expect to save the world on their first try, where they really should just worry about saving themselves. And I mean that like actually learning the skills that are required to be a good academic. Okay, so if now we are looking at a PhD as learning to be an academic, what I've seen across everyone is that the key to sustainable learning is to make it fun. What do I mean by that? So there are obviously a lot of moving parts with a PhD, from reading papers, from taking notes on coding to writing. And I think you have to make sure that some part of it is just genuinely fun for you. In the beginning, you're not gonna be very good at it, so it's just by definition not gonna be very fun. You have to make sure that some part of it is just by default exciting for you. Some people really like their note-taking apps, myself being one of them. So for me, coming up with a little system on how I organize my notes around a topic in the literature, how I kind of treat all the stuff, how I manage my thoughts, how I keep track of everything is fun. So for me, interacting with my notes is a part that makes it fun no matter what. Or for example, there is reading literature. Since I got this trusty little iPad mini, which have the little pop socket on it, and then I can just read papers super well. Since I've got this one, reading papers just became fun by default. It's not easy, so for me, learning to read management papers is quite a challenge. But ever since I got this little guy, it's just so much nicer to do so. It just makes it sprinkles in a bit of fun to it. Or I have a professor who is really into Quarto, the open source editor, publisher, software, everything stack. And then he lives in our studio, and then I try to convince him, like, yeah, maybe like getting out of our studio and getting into Visual Studio Code could be nice. And then he put together the coolest VS Code setup I have ever seen. He put the time in to customize it, color scheme, like this thematics, everything. And then for him, that's fun. Like, he just enjoys tinkering with the tools. I think we should all find something that's fun for us. Maybe it's the environment. You need to get a bunch of writing done. And then, okay, go to a cafe that you really like, that the atmosphere is there. And then see how that feels. And of course, there is a time to lock yourself in the library, in a basement, and then just tune everything out. But if you don't need to, I would advise against doing that, because it's just gonna feel much less of a struggle if you're actually having fun in the meantime. All right, so these were all the thoughts I have on this topic for now. If I get new ones, you will be the first to know. Let me know what you think, because I am kind of torn between this being a big cope and I just really want to kind of grasp onto something to make this like easier psychologically, or this being a bit of a hubris situation. You know, I'm 8 months into my PhD, who am I to tell you how to do it? So I think it's important to look at this as me kind of sharing where I am with my thinking now. So maybe a year from now, I'm gonna look at this very video and then I'm gonna be like, ha, what an idiot. And then that's fine. You know, we are just like learning in public here. And yeah, let me know what you think, whether this resonates with you. And make sure like you have some fun in the process. Yeah, that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.